and is going to be uploaded to YouTube for participants and viewers in different time zones. So if I can introduce Dr. Chan first off. Again, as I say, she's from the Hong Kong Baptist University in China, and she's going to be talking about cultivating global citizenship through virtual student seminars. And this is a cross-cultural educational approach that we shall hear more of. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Chan.
All right, thank you for the introduction. And I'm going to share my PowerPoint slides here. So everything's good. All right, is my voice clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay, yes, that's good. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Sidney. I'm a lecturer at Hong Kong Baptist University College of International Education. So in my presentation today, and I'm going to share how I foster global citizenship and through the how I foster global citizenship among my students through a virtual student seminar organized with 2 universities in Kazakhstan, a country in Central Asia. All right. So to start with and to give a bit of the background of why I organized the student seminar, because my college prioritizes internationalization to develop students' global skills and citizenship. So our virtual exchanges, such as my seminar with university in Kazakhstan, give students cross-cultural experience and real-world application of concepts from the courses, cultural studies and English studies courses. So to fulfill the strategy, and there are 3 key questions to consider. The first one is, what is global citizenship? And the second one is, how do we foster global citizenship, and what roles do educators do? What roles do we play? And why is virtual exchange important for developing global citizenship? And these are the 3 questions that I'm gonna address in my presentation today. So for the first question, what is global citizenship? When I think about how to cultivate global citizenship in my courses, I follow UNESCO model. Global citizenship education involves 3 domains: cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral domain. And I believe the goal of global citizenship education is to expand students' sense of belonging and civic responsibility beyond the national orders, and to encourage students to participate in the global community and act for the common good. But I would see my role more as the facilitator of the other 2 domains, that is the cognitive domain and the social emotional domain. And for the cognitive domain, that focuses on social responsibility, which is how I help students to be more concerned about others and for society as large. And the social emotional domain centers on global awareness. That's to help students understand themselves in the world, appreciate diversity, and recognize global issues. And this leads to my second question is, how do we foster global citizenship and what roles do we play? So as an educator, my primary role, as I mentioned, is that of a facilitator of citizen activism. So drawing on the work of Laurie Hansen, who emphasizes the importance of citizen activism, I view my responsibility as empowering students to actively participate in social and political processes as a result of enabling them to effect meaningful change in their communities and the wider world. So here comes the question is how to empower students. And from a perspective is that empowering students involve equipping students with the knowledge, skills, and confidence that are necessary for them to take informed and responsible actions on issues of global significance. And this aligns with the 2 domains I mentioned before, the cognitive and social emotional domains of global citizenship education. So specifically, my approach centers on 2 key areas. One is responsibility, the other one is solidarity. And for the area of responsibility is to help students recognize their responsibility to contribute positively to global community. That is to encourage them to consider the broader implication of their actions through the knowledge that they have learned in class. For solidarity, that is to promote mutual understanding and cooperation on global issues. So to achieve these aims, I adapt my teaching strategies and materials to introduce students to unfamiliar cultures and global perspectives. So in my course, I introduced Kazakhstan to Hong Kong students who are not very familiar with this country at all. And let me share the map here to give a clearer view of the geographical location of Kazakhstan, as many of you may be, many of the participants that may not be very familiar with this country as well. So Kazakhstan is the largest country in Central Asian region. It is a truly multicultural society with more than 120 nationalities. As you can see from the map, Kazakhstan is uniquely positioned at the crossroads of the major countries connecting Europe and Asia and share borders with China. And it has a coastline on the Caspian Sea. And Kazakhstan was a republic of the former Soviet Union and declared the independence in 1991. And it provides a very unique blend of Russian influence and Central Asian history. And therefore say that it is one of the most ethnically and religiously diverse nations because of its history and nomadic culture. And for the two universities that I collaborated with when I organized the virtual student seminar, one is KIMAP University, which is an American-style university located in Almaty. As you can see from the right side of the map, Almaty is Kazakhstan's largest city, and it was the country's capital until 1997. The other university is Yazanov University, which is located in Aktau. As you can see on the right side of the left side of the map, it borders the Caspian Sea and the only inland sea in the world. And that is why I chose these two universities in Kazakhstan as partners to organize virtual student seminars, as to promote opportunities for global awareness among students. So my approach to fostering global citizenship is grounded in three interconnected pillars, with an emphasis on providing scaffolding support, because you cannot just ask your student to do virtual exchange and then they can do it effectively. So for the very first stage, I provide students with access to information about global challenges, such as the misrepresentation of cultures in media and issues of social injustice or social justice. For example, when I teach my course, Media Society, to cultural studies students, I use the media portrayal of Kazakhstan to illustrate how Western misinterpretations can result in persistent stereotypes about Kazakhstan and its people. And in class, we discussed how Kazakhstan has limited means to counter these externally imposed assumptions, which highlights the real-world impact of media narratives. And then the next stage is skill development. So I emphasize the cultivation of critical thinking, which is essential for students to participate constructively in global discussion. So in my class, I incorporated the film Borat into classroom discussions to analyze the representation of Kazakhstan as the Oriental other. So this movie is a satirical mockumentary because it uses the character of Borat Zadiev, who's a fictional Kazakh TV presenter, to comment on American culture, while simultaneously perpetuating exoticized and stereotypical images of Kazakhstan. By using this example, I encourage students to critically examine how media products can reinforce or challenge cultural stereotypes, and to reflect on why such representations are both familiar and consumable for Western audiences. Now, when it comes to the other stage, that is experiential learning. Now I have to think about how to bridge theory and practice, and that's why I initiated this virtual student seminar, which is designed to create opportunities for students to present and share their research findings on global issues. Now, through the virtual these student seminars, the participants, the presenters, they can participate in these cross-cultural dialogues. Because the students from Kazakhstan and Hong Kong, they have to be responsible for preparing their own presentation titles and materials for these seminars. So during the process, it develops students' essential skills in communication, critical thinking, when they reflect on their own beliefs. And then my third question, that is, why is virtual exchange important for developing global citizenships? Now, basically, I would say that our world is becoming more like a digital communities, that young people are more willing to participate in conversations online. And the two biggest benefits of virtual exchange or the virtual seminar, student seminars that I've organized, from what I've observed, is that it breaks barriers, because the virtual exchange democratizes access to international experiences. And for some students, traditional study abroad opportunities are limited by financial, logistical, or personal constraints. And I would say that virtual exchange offers equal learning opportunities because it provides an alternative and allows a wider and more diverse group of students to engage in the intercultural dialogue. And the other is the dialogue and participation in the student seminar. Traditionally, the classroom dynamics has often been teacher-centered. We as educators are often positioned as the primary source of knowledge and students as passive recipients. And this model limits opportunities for students to engage in meaningful discussion. So the virtual student seminar adapts a more participatory approach where learners and when students become the active contributors in the educational journey. Now I'm going to show you more details regarding the seminar that I organized. So this online student seminar brought together participants from Kimap University and Yasenot University in Kazakhstan. And these students are from different departments. Students from Kimap University, they are from the Department of Journalism. And students from Yasenot University, they are from the Department of International Politics. And our students, they are from Cultural Studies and Professional Communication and English Studies. So we can see that the seminar really connects students with peers from different countries and backgrounds. Here are some examples of our Hong Kong student presenters and some pictures about the Kazakhstani student presenters. But what I want to show you these PowerPoint slides regarding the presentation topics that the student has done in the past. So you can see that it is a very dialogue-rich environment. For example, our students will present their research findings on K-pop or on Hong Kong movies regarding their the Asian social context. And students from Kazakhstan, they will present topics on the border clashes in Central Asia and also some Kazakh stereotypes. And I would say that such dialogue-rich environments encourage students to share their ideas, to raise questions, and to listen to diverse perspectives. And this process of active participation and reflections is very fundamental to developing the mindset and skills of global citizens, because the students becomes more informed, more open-minded, and ready to engage with global issues. And the next slide here, this is the booklet that we have prepared for the seminar in 2023. And each year we decided a seminar topic, and students can determine their presentation titles and the research based on the seminar topic, the seminar theme. And instead of just asking students to do presentation, we also invited the professors from Hong Kong, also from Kazakhstan, to give keynote speeches. And on the left side, it is the booklet from last year, and on the right side is the booklets that we prepared for the seminar this year. So we can see that we have different seminar themes for different years, for the seminar in different years. Now, lastly, I want to talk about the outcomes. Students gave very positive feedbacks regarding the virtual student seminar, but I want to highlight the two aspects that students especially appreciated is the development of a scholarly voice and heightened social awareness. Some of the students were not very confident in presenting their materials because they were not so sure whether they were able to discuss complex topics. But the seminar provided students a training to express their ideas with greater clarity and critical depth, and therefore cultivating a stronger scholarly voice in themselves. And for the social awareness, that is because in the seminar, they got the exposure to different global issues, and the intercultural dialogue with students from Kazakhstan really heightened our students' sense of social awareness and responsibility, which encouraged them to consider their roles as global citizenships. And of course, there's some ongoing skepticism regarding whether short-term international experiences, such as virtual exchanges, can truly foster the deep transformative learning required for the genuine global citizenship. But I would say that the direct exposure to new experiences beyond abstract conceptualization really matters, because at its core, global citizenship is about recognizing and reflecting on our connections to the environment we affect and to the people with whom we interact, both directly and indirectly. So it is the willingness to recognize and critically reflect on these connections is what distinguishes those who really consciously embrace their roles as global citizens. So in summary here, I would say that the student seminar served as quite a powerful platform for fostering global citizenship by expanding student perspective, by nurturing their reflective thinking, and also by encouraging their active engagement with the global issues. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chan. If we could have a round of applause. That was so comprehensive. You raised so many important issues around what particularly impressed me was that this was the how to, not just this is what we should be doing, but this is the how to do it as well. Now, I'm aware that we haven't got all our speakers for this afternoon's panel. Is that right? But, yes, Dr. Humphreys here. Okay, in that case. Okay, in that case, I was going to suggest we open it up to discussion for each speaker, but because we do have 4 of the 5 speakers here, maybe we should keep, keep a tight rein on it. Do we have any sort of immediate questions for Dr. Chan? Otherwise, we could keep them to the discussion period. But is there anything that you would like to raise immediately? Yes. Maybe? Please. Emma, yes. Oh, yeah.
Hey, Sidney, good to see you. Really glad. Hi, Sidney. Good to see you.
Hello, Emma.
Really glad to know that your conference is still going on after this many years. This would be the 3rd year, right? Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
So based on the topics that you shared in your presentation, I can see that in our design of the student conference, we have accomplished the first 2 stages of virtual exchange task design, that is information sharing and critical reflection. I was wondering whether there's any design to facilitate collaboration between Hong Kong and Kazakhstan students, things that would be the, in terms of progressive virtual exchange model, that would be the 3rd stage, is to facilitate collaborative projects for students to work together.
Yeah, I have to admit that. Yeah, thank you for the question. I have to admit that this is also the aspect that I'm still thinking how to work on that. Before the COVID, I planned a study tour to Kazakhstan, and but during the COVID, it didn't happen indeed. And before COVID, there were 2 direct flights to Kazakhstan from Hong Kong to Kazakhstan, but after COVID, all the direct flights were being cancelled. So it's not quite possible to arrange a study tour to Kazakhstan to meet the students there. So that's why I organized this virtual student seminar. I would say that they engaged in the intercultural dialogue more during the seminar, because they will raise questions to ask the students from the other side regarding the topics that they presented on. So if you ask about the last stage, about civic engagement, is that what you mean here? then probably I think we still need to work more on that aspect. And that's why in the presentation, I mentioned that I focus more on the first two domains, that is the social, emotional, and also the cognitive domains. First, I have to let them know what actually happened in the world besides the cultures that they are familiar with, not just the Korean cultures or the Western cultures.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chan. Please do hold your questions for Dr. Chan for the discussion period at the end. So we're now going to move on to Dr. Gareth Humphreys and his colleague, Dr. Rob Herschel. And Gareth is from Sojo University in Japan. And Rob is also the same university, so Sojo University in Japan. And they're going to be talking to us about student letters to themselves. Interesting. And this is a reflective intercultural learning in higher education that they're going to be talking to us about. So over to you, Gareth and Rob.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen, and then I think Rob is going to introduce the presentation.
Fantastic.
Can you see this? Oh, excuse me.
It's being loaded, perhaps? Don't see it yet.
Right, just 1 moment.
Ah, okay.
Okay, that's full screen?
Full screen, yeah.
Right, okay, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Gareth. Can you advance to the next slide?
I can. I'm afraid I've got
Oh,
subtitles set up as I use it with my students. Yes, here we go.
fantastic. Okay, so let me give you a quick overview. This study explores a reflective innovation in an intercultural education course here at Sojo University. Essentially, students wrote a letter to themselves at the start of the course and revisited it at the end. And the aim was to focus on reflection, on personal change, and students' own awareness and identification of their intercultural learning. In this presentation, we provide details of the innovation, how we analyzed its effectiveness, and we discuss how it may be applied in virtual exchange settings. The next slide will give you the organization, the background and rationale I've touched on briefly. I'll next give you the institutional context. Gareth will explain the conceptual framework for analyzing reflections and the innovation itself, the letter to myself. He will also go over the research design, the key findings, discussion, and finally, implications. So we work at Sojo University, and we teach an elective online intercultural learning course. And this course is for non-language majors. The participants are undergraduate students, mostly Japanese, with a mix of science and engineering majors. The course structure is a 15-week class. It is an on-demand course, and it's taught, it's instructed in both English and Japanese by ourselves. And this is part of an internationalization at home initiative aimed at promoting intercultural learning without the need to go abroad. And while this is not a virtual exchange program per se, it does share key principles in its promotion of intercultural learning and critical self-reflection in our online setting. What we found in our experience is that reflective writing is a common feature in general education here in Japan, but it's often, not always, but often treated as procedural or superficial. Students frequently produce brief descriptive reflections that lack evidence of self-awareness or critical insight. That's not to say that it doesn't occur, but we don't necessarily see the evidence. And so we wanted to develop an innovation that would offer a structured and student-centered way of reflecting on and identifying students' own intercultural learning.
Thank you, Rob. So moving on to some of the background behind the innovation. Reflection is widely promoted in education, including in Japan. yet its definition and purpose are often unclear or inconsistently applied. So we see intercultural learning as requiring more than knowledge of other cultures, factual knowledge, but that it involves self-awareness, openness, empathy, and the ability to critically examine one's own assumptions. We also consider that reflection can support this engagement by helping students connect their own experiences of life to the learning that might be taking place on the course that we teach on. But we acknowledge that without structural support, students often produce, as Rob mentioned, this sort of task-focused or descriptive responses with little evidence of personal insight, or they may reproduce what they expect us as the teachers that we want to hear. So in terms of defining reflection, I'll go through these quickly. Reflection is the active, persistent, and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds that support it. That's an old definition. It's a deliberate meaning-making process where learners interpret and connect experiences to deepen understanding. It includes both cognitive and emotional dimensions of learning. It's an internal dialogue that helps individuals examine their experiences in relation to learning. And it can range from descriptive to transformative, where individuals question deeper implications of their actions and beliefs. And it's not the same as self-assessment, in that reflection focuses more on personal meaning and change. So drawing on these definitions, we understood or understand reflection as this deliberate personal meaning-making process involving examination of one's own experiences, assumptions, and emotions in ways which may deepen understanding and support learning. A core principle of this study and the course that we teach on really is that the students shouldn't be told what to think or feel or learn during their intercultural reflections. When reflection is tightly structured or graded, students, as noted, focus perhaps on meeting some external criteria rather than engaging in their own individual, authentic, meaning-making processes. So assessing intercultural learning in this way risks reinforcing fixed views or expected outcomes, which can obscure diversity and complexity in students' individual perspectives and experiences. So we recognize reflections as a space where students may or may not use to identify and articulate their own intercultural learning in ways which are personally meaningful. In this research, in looking at perhaps I'll come back to this slide, if that's okay. So the innovation we developed, as noted, we're trying, teaching culture through facts, like typical rules or national communication styles, quite common in educational contexts globally, and especially in English language teaching, which is, central to our context, really. We are primarily English language teachers. But when treated as an endpoint to learning, this kind of culture learning risks reinforcing essentialist understandings of cultures where people from a particular named culture will share fixed traits or behaviors. This kind of information can have value, but on its own, it's unlikely to be sufficient to prepare students to engage in multicultural settings. So, as noted, intercultural learning for us involves developing empathy, curiosity, and openness. And to become future ready, we designed the course to provide students with opportunities to engage with different types of intercultural learning experiences, which encourage them to think deeply about themselves and others. So yes, students wrote a letter to themselves at the beginning of the course. And they've considered what they hope to learn about themselves and others, what their expectations for learning on the course were, their motivations and any prior intercultural learning experiences, and their understandings of culture and anticipated challenges of learning on the course. There was no word limit set. The students were able to write in English or Japanese or other language. We have a small number of non-Japanese students. Then we collected the letters and stored them. Actually, they were stored on online space using Moodle. And then they were presented to the students at the end of the course. So in the final week, students received their original letters and were asked again to reflect on what had or had not changed in their thinking, what they found interesting about their initial letters, and how their views on themselves, others, and culture had developed. And these reflections were assessed only in terms of completion. They were not assessed in terms of quality or depth. And in analyzing the reflections from the students, we organized them into two groups. There were 50 students who worked with the letter writing activity, that's case A. And case B was 50 students from a previous cohort which didn't have the same innovation. The students were all aged 19 to 21, mixed genders, mostly Japanese and science and engineering majors. Most texts were written in Japanese and these were translated into English. And we analyzed this using this Kemba, McKay, Sinclair, Wong's conceptual framework, categories of reflection. So in 4 parts: habitual action or non-reflection, which is repetition of learned material without providing evidence of deeper engagement. And that moves on to understanding, which is grasping concepts, but without providing evidence of personal connections. Reflection is examples of integrating personal experiences with learning. And critical reflection is a reassessment of personal beliefs and assumptions as interpreted by us, the research. We chose this because it was a flexible and sort of content neutral way to assess levels of, or to interpret levels of reflective engagement without prescribing outcomes. And we used it, so we coded student texts according to the highest level of reflection demonstrated, and then did a more focused content analysis at the item level of specific themes and statements. So this particular 4-category framework recognizes that reflection is individual, or can be used in the way that we've used it to recognize that reflection is individual and complex, but is also a structured means to interpret the depth of evidenced engagement. So case A, which was the group that used the innovation, you can see here at the lower level, habitual and non-reflection, there were 6, these were coded according to the highest level that we interpreted. So there were 6 at habitual and non-reflection, whereas case B were 19. Understanding was 10 against 16, and then high level reflection, you can see 34 there, as opposed to 15 in case B at reflection and critical reflection. We then developed some subcategories within these 4 categories, and you can see here with some illustrative data. And the coding on the right is the content analysis at the level of item. But the subcategories, because the reflections were quite diverse, it was necessary for us to use to bring in subcategories to aid in the content analysis. So firstly, it was basic recall of information without deeper analysis, then general descriptive language learning, language lacking personal insight, references to participation activities without reflection in their significance, and emphasis on completing tasks or achieving results without personal reflection, writing about culture in a general or stereotypical way without deeper understanding. And you can see the numbers on the right with case B are slightly higher than those with case A. With understanding, theoretical understanding without personal connection, basic acknowledgement of emotions without deeper exploration, recognizing basic intercultural aspects without personal engagement. And then reflection at the higher levels were examples of connecting personal experiences with intercultural concepts that we would teach you on the course, considering the impact of learning on personal beliefs and behaviors, demonstrating self-awareness, thought processes, and indicating ongoing learning. And then finally, the critical reflection was deeper analysis and reassessment of personal beliefs and assumptions, indication of personal change and adaptation, integrating multiple perspectives and demonstrating new intercultural learning. And you can see again here, case A on the left has higher numbers than case B at the level of item. So in brief, the lower levels more common with case B. Students often focus more on what they did and less on what they thought or felt. Whereas students in case A, the intervention group, produced more instances of reflection and critical reflection, indicating that the innovation supported more meaningful and transformative learning. Despite this finding, though, some students in the intervention group still exhibited habitual reflection, which just shows the challenge of ensuring that there is consistent engagement across particular cohorts. So the innovation we describe offers one potentially useful means for structured reflection, which may be applicable in other contexts and may be useful to the audience here, because it may support learning focus on the processes of learning over product. That is, focus on personal meaning making and not on assessment-driven responses. So we may use this in the future. It could be used in journaling or with letters written at different times through the year or through a particular course. It could, could take the form of video diaries. And I think we may introduce more prompts to guide students' reflections, but without constraining them by indicating what we expect them to write about. This might include considering a prompt on how any insights gained may influence their future intercultural communication and engagement. But of course, we acknowledge that not all students may have been able to, or willing really, to articulate deeper insights in their writing. Sometimes deep reflection happens without being fully expressed, and sometimes written reflections can sound deep, but may not reflect deep reflection. We find this model is useful, but it can oversimplify complex individual reflection, hence the need to bring in the subcategories. And local students, Japanese students' occasional discomfort with personal expression may have shaped responses. And also some interpretations of the reflective depth may have been lost despite our bilingual checks. And we, of course, have bias as qualitative researchers, and our dual role as teachers and researchers in this process could have influenced the findings. And that concludes the presentation. I hope I'm within time.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you for listening.
And thank you to Rob. Sorry.
Thank you.
Can I ask if we could hold off on questions for Rob and Gareth until the end? We may be missing one speaker, which means we might have a bit more time. But rather than sort of do it in bits, I think what we'll do is move on to the next speaker, which was going to be me and my colleague Maria Meredith. But given that, I believe, can I just ask, is Miss Yunlu Wang from Georgia State University in the US, is she online? I don't think she is, which means that what I'm going to ask then is that could we move, rather than me and we'll, could we move instead to Dr. Dick Eugenio from the World City Colleges in the Philippines? And then I'll round up and we can then move on to the discussion section. So do we have Dr. Dick Eugenio with us from World City Colleges in the Philippines?
Yes, I am here, sir.
Wonderful, thank you. Great to meet you. So I hope you don't mind that we just have a slight change in the order of the speakers. So Dr. Dick Eugenio will be talking to us about micro-credentials, the importance of micro-credentials. Certainly, we've been thinking about that at the university that I work at. So it'd be important to hear more. And you're going to talk about micro-credentials as vehicles for global learning, a COIL-based approach to building intercultural competence and future-ready skills. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, whatever your time is. We are in a global village, so time can be relative. But good evening, and thank you, Hong Kong Baptist University, for organizing this conference and for giving a platform for everybody to share their ideas and their insights. Let me just share my screen, and then I'll go with my presentation. Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so my presentation is on micro-credentials as vehicles for global learning, especially a COIL-based approach to building intercultural competence and future-ready skills. Let me give a few introductions. The context that we're dealing with is the urgency for global engagement in higher education. There's a need for global competence in the global market, especially if you want our graduates to be very competitive. They need to have intercultural skills and global competence as part of their arsenal, not just the technical knowledge and technical skills of their profession. The problem is that global competence and intercultural skills cannot be easily attained by many students because of financial constraints, because of lack of access to physical mobility. And so the opportunity is that COIL and VE, virtual exchange in higher education, is very much a trend today. And also the rise of micro-credentials, especially after the pandemic all over the world. especially in Asia. This has been major discussion since 2021. A plethora of publications have really spread so much about microcredentials. And so my proposal this evening is to integrate microcredentials with COIL to promote inclusive global learning. And I'm gonna speak about a few advantages of this in a bit. But before that, a few definitions, very, very short definitions, because we are familiar with these terms already. Microcredentials are short, focused educational certifications that recognize the acquisition of specific skills or competencies. They are specifically competency-based, skills-based. They are portable and verifiable. They go with flexible learning. They can be online or laboratory-based or in person, depending on the outcomes and the competencies that we want our students to attain. They are scalable, but they are also stackable. COIL, as we all know, is a structured form of virtual exchange where faculty and students co-design, co-teach, and collaborate in joint online learning environments. And they can be learning synchronously or asynchronously. They are co-designed and co-taught, usually by two different faculty of two different nationalities. There is a virtual team of students from two or three, at least two nationalities. They can be done synchronously or asynchronously. Learning activities can be very diverse and creative based on the imagination of the faculty members and the facilitators. And there's a focus on intercultural competence. Of course, there are differences between the two. So, for example, in terms of purpose, microcredentials are short outcome-focused skill validation, methods of credentialing things. Learning. COIL is virtual internationalization via collaborative learning. In terms of framework, we have the EU Common Credentials Framework. We have the OECD, UNESCO, National Qualifications Frameworks. EU has one, Malaysia has one. I'm not familiar with Hong Kong if you already have an NQF for microcredentials, related to microcredentials, but I know Malaysia has published something quite extensive in 2023 or 2022. Australia, of course, has one. Canada, US, they already have their own frameworks. COIL is based on social constructive pedagogy, which means that people learn through interaction, through collaboration. There's emphasis on contextual learning, active learning, shared process of learning, and all those things. These are very important later on when we combine them in a proposed framework that I'm gonna speak about. Delivery structure, microcredentials are short. They can be 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, stackable. COIL are also the same. They are phase structure with design group projects over period of sessions, consecutive or spread out throughout the semester or year. In terms of learner outcomes, microcredentials focus on upskilling, degree stacking, and employability. COIL has the same thing, but the focus is predominantly on intercultural competence and digital teamwork and global awareness, intercultural communication, collaboration, creativity, all of these things. So the advantages of combining COIL and microcredentials are quite obvious. There's intercultural simulation experience, portable global exposure because of it's online, it's virtual, enhanced intercultural competence because you need to speak, you need to engage in discussion, you need to collaborate, you need to be active in the learning process. There's a future-ready skills development because you are developing students for the marketplace with global competence and cultural sensitivity. Typically, we talk about the forces of the 21st century, but I want to add one, which is contextualization. So we have collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, communication, and contextualization. We have verifiable and portable digital credentials that can be recognized by anywhere in the world. So a microcredential COIL offered by HKBU can be recognized in the Philippines. Stackable and flexible learning, reflective and interdisciplinary thinking, because we want students, while there is beauty in disciplinary approach, interdisciplinary COIL programs, like students in the same class can be from business, education, IT, etc. Because the goal is not disciplinary skills, but global competence, intercultural competence. Of course, there's alignment with global employability frameworks. So my proposed framework for all these things combine microcredentials and COIL is this. At the very center, is a microcredential COIL course. And the theories that support the microcredential courses will be Dildorf's process model of intercultural competence, which is a process-oriented developmental view, which starts with attitudes, moving towards knowledge and skills, and then culminating in internal or external outcomes. And then we have OECD and UNESCO's Global Competence Framework, published in 2018, which defines what global competence is. And then we have WEF, World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs Report, which was published in 2020, which highlights competence such as problem solving, critical thinking, adaptability, cross-cultural collaboration, digital literacy, and all of those things. So all these three pillars can support microcredential core courses, but outside of them are learning theories like constructivism, adult learning, learner-centered education, collaborative learning, experiential learning, and skills-based learning. All of this will be crucial in the implementation of a microcredential COIL course. I'm not going to elaborate on all of these things because we are all educators. I'm sure you are more familiar than me about all of these theories. Surrounding all of these are two major things. First is outcomes-based education, which is important because what we want to focus on is not just theoretical knowledge, but full acquisition of skills. The outcomes must be skills acquired throughout the learning process. And then, of course, very, very important is the consideration of the national qualification frameworks, especially what is level 5, level 6, level 7 in each country, so that a microcredential course offered in Hong Kong, for example, which is level 6, let's say level 6, can be credited and stackable to a same level 6 program found in the Philippines. And so there are, of course, in the ASEAN qualifications frameworks, we have the appropriate level of knowledge, skills, interdependence. Also, all of these things need to be considered in the design of the microcredential COIL course. And so let's say, for example, a university in Canada will offer a microcredential COIL course to people in Asia. The qualifications, the national qualifications level of that will be included in the certification, in the badge or in the certificate, which can be credited anywhere in the world because of that qualifications framework. So this is where stackable credentials can happen. And of course, it's quite nice to have, let's say, a microcredential certification from Canada as a student in the Philippines. Even if it's not stackable, even if it's a standalone certification, it's quite nice to have an extra certification of skills that you can present when you do your job hunting later on. Some considerations that I'd like to discuss if we go this way. Some challenges and considerations. First one is the co-design approach. Joint planning is crucial. Understanding of the qualifications framework, understanding of the different learning theories is crucial for faculty members to do this. Faculty roles and responsibilities need to be defined. Technology stack. There needs to be agreement on what is available platform especially on specific skills that we want our students to attain. Time zone management, that's always challenging with virtual exchanges. Last night I had a meeting with this, and we were negotiating with a COIL partner what time should we engage in the synchronous discussions. Intercultural facilitation, feedback integration, especially regular check-ins, especially if you want to ascertain that the skills are being acquired, there must be evaluation mid and not only after the course. Again, microcredentials very, very strongly skills focused. Credit recognition is another challenge and consideration. They can be standalone microcredentials given as certifications that you can attach to your CV, or stackable microcredentials like 3 1-unit microcredentials added to become one certification or to become one course in a degree program. So HEIs are free to develop microcredentials attached to specific courses or independent of different courses in the curriculum, and they can be either standalone microcredentials or stackable microcredentials. So, for example, problem solving in a global workplace, that may not be attached to a course, but you can create a standalone microcredential with COIL students engaged in that class, right? Mutual credit recognition is also very important. I'm gonna talk about this a bit more, especially in relationship to learning hours and credit system. So Carnegie unit system, which is used in the US and in the Philippines, EU credit system, Europeans and some, I think Singapore uses EU credit transfer system. Australia, we have the UK GLH, TQT, the Scottish framework as well. But what's important are the activity standards and the measurable expectations. And so we can define structured evaluation. Let's say, for example, it is expected that for a level 5 microcredential, students are expected to be able to read 15 pages per hour so that the learning hours are calculated appropriately. Level 7 in the Philippines would be a master's level. So how many pages can you read in 1 hour? So all of these things need to be defined as activity standards and learning hours based on the qualification frameworks of your country. Technological tools, also very important. What virtual learning environment are you going to use? What LMS? Poly-specific tools as well. I mean, these are common things that we address during COIL. Faculty loading is another thing. Credit equivalent in the teaching load need to be decided by the administration. For a 30-hour COIL, microcredential COIL, how would that translate to a teaching load? And of course, incentivizing this, because microcredential COIL, this add burden to faculty members, especially if they are new to or even if they are creating a new course. And so this can be included in the faculty merit ranking tool, in the research extension credit, and of course, professional development needs to be given to them because they are designing curriculum, they are doing cross-institutional coordination, they are using new technologies, and so professional development need to be aligned with the discussions as well. Finally, digital credentialing is crucial. We need to use recognized platforms that are transferable, recognized everywhere, like Credly, Funbadge, Canada has one, Concred. They need to be, the essential metadata should be there in the credentials, like institution, NQF level, portability, as well. Blockchain-based credentialing is crucial so that you can credit all the certificates anywhere in the world. And of course, we need to create institutional repositories. That will be it. I'm sorry I spoke too fast because I know my time is short.
No, Dick,
So thank you very
okay,
much.
thank you. Can we have a round of applause for Dick? Wonderful. Dick, that raises so many interesting questions, which we will turn to shortly. We have, if you can hold your questions, I've got lots for you, Dick, actually. I think that micro-credentials raise so many important issues, particularly in light of lifelong learning. And certainly in the UK, we're moving towards an entitlement where what you can be funded can be spread out over time. So micro-credentials are a very, very interesting topic. So we're going to finish up with myself and I will be talking us through the last session. Do you want to put the slides on? Or no, well, yes, you might jump in. Maybe. So I should say that I'm here with my colleague Maria Meredith, and we're giving two presentations. Yesterday, Maria led the session on our first presentation. Today, I'm going to lead the session, but Maria, please feel free to jump in at any point, particularly as this is a work in progress. And we're just going to share the slides. I will keep to time, and then what we can do is then open up and have a discussion where you can ask any of our presenters any questions. Now, I could stay here in front of the camera if you like, if you don't mind, unless you prefer me to stand up. Would you prefer me to stand up or? Yeah. Okay.
I'll move forward, Alex, and if I need to jump in, I'll
yes, do, and then you can just. Now, will that work? Okay, so thank you for attending this session on what started off, I should say, in the program, that it started off, the title was Navigating Boundaries in Virtual Exchange, a UK-Indonesia case study of a transnational community of inquiry. But just over the last day or two, being here at the conference has made me sort of reassess and rethink about the presentation. And after all, isn't this what we're here for? To sort of reassess our work. And I've realized that it's not navigating a tool, but it's a process of negotiation that I want to talk about. And so I will talk to you through that lens of change as well. So this is drawing on an existing partnership between the University of Gloucestershire, where myself and Maria Meredith work in the UK, and the Universitas Ahmad Dahlan, which is a Mohammedan university in Yogyakarta and part of a much broader group of 172 Mohammedan universities within that very, very large and wonderful archipelago. We're now going into the third iteration of this program with our second year undergraduate students who are all studying education, inclusion and special educational needs. So these early childhood and so on. And they work together over 12 weeks as part of a summative module. So this is assessed. I know Dick was talking about micro-credentials and all the problems that we may get into in terms of quality assurance if we're transferring credentials, but we leave the actual assessment. We assess our students, they assess their students, but there is a process of moderation that goes on. Anyway, we adopted what's called a community of inquiry approach. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that approach, but it maps specifically onto work being undertaken by somebody called Alison Scott Bauman and others as part of a UK Arts and Humanities Research Council funded project, which seeks to make difficult conversations on complex topics feasible and productive by providing a systematic approach that gives agency and voice to students and staff. So we believe that transposing this coffee approach into this transnational, the transnational context of virtual exchange and COIL is relatively new. So please tell me if it isn't and you're working with this particular approach. You can certainly read more in our open access chapter that's coming out in October, November, which is part of an edited collection of volumes that Alison has edited. And the title of our chapter is Enabling Free Speech Through Virtual Communities of Inquiry When the Global North Meets Global South. So the concept of community inquiry isn't new, of course. It was first introduced by early pragmatist philosophers, Peirce, John Dewey, concerning that nature of knowledge formation and the process of scientific inquiry. So crucially, the community of inquiry emphasizes that knowledge is necessarily embedded within a social context and as a result requires intersubjective agreement among those involved in the process of inquiry for legitimacy. Hence, me changing the title to negotiation, because there's something here that I think I've missed, and it's that negotiated element. And I'm hoping that by the end of the next 10 minutes, that might become a little clearer. So also, those of you who are interested, you might want to look at the work of Garrison, Anderson, and Archer in 2000, who also identified key 3 elements from that form the effective foundation of an effective educational experience: teaching presence, cognitive presence, and social presence. In any event, one of the key areas that we've been interested in as educators, Maria and myself, in our reflections of our virtual exchange collaborations, and that desire to enhance ongoing collaboration, working and outcomes for students in future years, is the ways in which we embrace the notion of developing intercultural competence in our students, but without fully appreciating the boundaried nature of these exchanges. I think to some extent that has been missing, in particular regarding what can and can't be said. So this remains, we would like to suggest, largely under-theorized within the VE COIL literature and often not fully thought through in preparation initiatives for and practice of VE COIL programs more generally. So yes, these initiatives are rightly celebrated for their potential to foster intercultural competence, global citizenship, encouraging dialogue and creative thinking and shared inquiry. But dialogic learning, which does sit at the heart of these initiatives, depends heavily on participation. And participation in turn is shaped by these various boundaries that can either facilitate or hinder that meaningful engagement. They're like invisible lines, if you like, that can determine what students feel entitled to say, how they express their ideas, and whether they feel confident enough to engage at all. So Maria, in the talk we gave yesterday on how role clarity, effective safety, and intercultural communication shape equitable participation in VE, alluded to some of these boundaries as being emotional, linguistic, cultural, technological. All of these can significantly impact how students express themselves and engage with others. Now, since these boundaries mediate open expression in such exchanges, it becomes necessary to recognize and, when necessary, challenge, or at the very least, mediate their impact, as they can act to enhance or hinder meaningful engagement across the learning experience. So, the first thing to clarify is boundaries are not the same thing as barriers. Barriers are more the sort of the rigid mechanisms that are put in place to protect yourself maybe from perceived threats. I mean, we've heard a lot about sort of barriers to the, barriers, but boundaries are more like guidelines. They're the rules, the limits that we set ourselves in respective contexts. to define acceptable behavior, interactions in our relationships. So boundaries help us to communicate our needs, our values, and the limits to others while respecting their autonomy and boundaries. So healthy boundaries promote mutual respect, trust, and understanding in relationships, and can help create a sense of safety and security. So while barriers stem from fear or maybe insecurity or creating distance, boundaries are based on self-awareness, self-respect, and mutual respect. So they need to be engaged with. And here are just some of the, I mean, if we think about clear and, if we think of some of the characteristics, clear and assertive, respectful of self and others, flexible and adaptive. I'm just going to leave it at that because I'm very aware of the time. But there are several typologies that people have used for boundaries that you may want to look at. Some of them are sort of more relational. Some of them are more workplace. This one in particular is more workplace, but you'll probably recognize some of these, you know, from the emotional to the material to the internal, with some lovely quotes here to sort of highlight the nature of some of those boundaries. Time, for example, well, I can only be part of this for, you know, for 30 minutes, or the time zones and so on. So let me just take us back to the Indonesian colleagues that we've been working with, the Indonesian students. And I just want to talk, I'll just use these two as examples. And while I do, I want you to be thinking of two questions for the discussion time. So if we think about emotional barriers, I want you to be thinking about how you perceive that balance between respect and critique in different cultural settings. I know I nearly came a cropper yesterday with Vicky, because Vicky was using this, you know, it was a great presentation and I loved it, but I was aware afterwards that the way that I posed some of the questions to Vicky afterwards could have been perceived as maybe confrontational. Exactly. And so rather than, actually, it was a great marker, for me, I felt it was a great mark of respect, because I was engaging directly with what Vicky was talking about. So for me, I was trying to show him that I'd been listening and that I wanted to talk more. So, but those things could be misconstrued, you know, and I think that when we were watching our students work together, they could report a certain hesitation when interacting with their counterparts. And I know Maria and I have had lots of conversations about why this is happening. You know, obviously in the Indonesian classrooms, there's that respect for authority. It's a deeply ingrained value. Students don't typically challenge or question their instructors. Whereas in contrast, you know, I will be telling my students, you know, don't listen to what I say. Don't take it at face value. If you listen to your elders all the time, you know, we're in a real mess in terms of climate change and things. So clearly we don't get everything right. So, you know, challenge. So I spend a lot of my time, but I know that in other contexts that might be seen as maybe inappropriate. And then the second question to be thinking about, how do cultural norms influence communication within your own learning environments? You know, every culture's got its own way of communicating, especially when it comes to things like politeness, directness, hierarchy, and so on. So in our work, we found this cultural difference could lead in some instances to a disconnect. Some of the Indonesian students reluctant to challenge ideas or express dissenting opinions, even if they were thinking them, for fear of offending instructors or peers. So this tension highlights how deeply ingrained cultural norms can be, and how they can create those invisible boundaries that limit the scope of the dialogue. So, and just briefly to add to that, before I sort of try and round up some of these thoughts, there are also, of course, changing cultural norms. I mean, in my lifetime as an academic, in my lifetime as a teaching, I've seen a dramatic shift in cultural norms within my own context that have been, and I'm sure in other contexts too, that are being mediated through social media, the polarization of debate and the fear of judgment. I've seen students become quieter and quieter and quieter in their fear of coming down on the wrong side of the debate. And I think as educators, you know, our role is to open up those discussions. If we don't have them, then it becomes, again, we're just perpetuating this polarization, and then we lose that nuance. So I think taking that thinking into the virtual exchange and COIL environments is really important. So what are the implications for EVE? Now we call EVE because the acronym, of course, is Equitable Virtual Exchange. So that's really where Maria and I are coming from. I think you probably will have noticed in some of the questions that we've asked and so on. It's about that, the equitable, how can we make this equitable for our students and the students of those that we engage with? What does it mean for our future COIL iterations? I think we need to do a number of things. We need to acknowledge that boundaries mediate participation in these programs. If we want the VE initiatives to really promote what a lot of our speakers have been talking about, global citizenship, intercultural communication, then we need to create the conditions for more equitable environments. But it's not the same thing as breaking down barriers, which of course we should be doing, but it's understanding the boundaried nature of VE COIL. They can be healthy and they can be negotiated. One of the things that I'm currently working on with some colleagues I'm at the University of Gloucestershire with Maria, but I'm working with colleagues at the University of Sheffield and also some people at Dallas, Texas and Michigan, is doing a pre-COIL 1 hour open access resource. So we're hoping to present on that in October at the IVEC conference, and then we're hoping in 2026 that will come out. But this being here at this conference has sort of helped me shape one of maybe the 10 issues that we might cover, and it's that sort of that notion of boundaries that I hadn't really up until the last couple of days really started to think through. So this is a work in progress. So I do appreciate you bearing with me and with us. Also, Maria mentioned yesterday that, or she alluded to the fact that it's not just the how, but also the where. And you alluded to those liminal spaces that are so important for students that are away from the gaze of the lecturer, you know, where some of the students might feel more relaxed and able to, you know, open up in a way that they might not do with in front of the lecturers or more formal larger classes. And just to conclude, so while virtual exchange opportunities do hold great promise for fostering intercultural competence, global citizenship, they're also shaped by complex boundaries that determine who can participate, how they engage, what they feel entitled to say. So the more we can understand those boundaries, we can start to work more effectively with them. Rather than solely seeking to address them, we can start to create more transformative learning experiences for all those students, and also generate a greater sense of belonging. I think if you feel that you belong, it does make the whole process a lot easier. So again, thank you very much for bearing with me. The problem with being a speaker and a moderator is you've got to wear two hats. So I'm going to go straight into the process of asking that if you could, if you've got questions for any of the speakers today, maybe we could start with the speakers online. I think that would be really nice. And then you could, you know, if you want to refer to anything I've been talking about, we can do that afterwards. So we've had some wonderful talks today. We started off with Dr. Chan, with Dr. Sidney Chan from the Hong Kong Baptist University. We then went on to Gareth Humphreys and Rob Herschel, and then we moved to Dr. Dick Eugenio. So we have 4 different topics. Do we have any particular questions to any of our speakers? Thank you. Oh, I've just been reminded to ask, could I just ask, is Miss Wang here? Miss Yunlu Wang from Georgia State University? No. No, I don't think so. Okay. So yes, we have. Yeah, more time for questions, exactly. If you want to introduce yourselves as well, that would be really helpful. Just say who you are and which where you work.
Opportunity to ask a question. I'm Emma from Language Center of Hong Kong Baptist University. So my question is addressed to Dr. Dick Eugenio about the microcredentials. So I think it's wonderful that we have a system where we focus on skills training. You know, this of course is becoming more and more in demand. But the problem is that we don't yet have a universal standard for skills training. As a language center, actually, we do offer people credits, digital credits for, you know, to celebrate their achievement in certain skills. But what we do is we require students to take certain courses, and once they pass, we issue those digital credits to them as a sort of micro credential. But that lacks universal recognition, and I don't know how well the job market is recognizing these micro credentials. So if you could share a little bit about what kind of standard you're using to determine who would qualify for these micro credentials and how well these credentials are recognized by the job market within your own cultural context, that'd be great. Thank you.
Very much for the question. Very difficult question. Indeed, we should recognize the reality that microcredentials is in its infancy stage in Asia. Certainly in the Philippines, the Commission on Higher Education just recently released the memorandum order, specifying standards, policies, and guidelines on microcredentials and their recognition, and how higher education institutions can offer them with specific guidelines on learning hours, on crediting, and the like. But the problem is that national governments like Malaysia has its own one, Australia has its own one, Indonesia has its own one, but there is no such thing as ASEAN framework yet on microcredentials that's agreed upon. So I think that is the next step to recognizing microcredentials in Asia. Otherwise, what we have are fragmented frameworks and quality assurance things across Asia. To a certain degree, there's hope already because the national qualification frameworks of these countries are based on the ASEAN qualification frameworks that was released many years ago. But still, a unified framework is not yet available, which is very difficult, as you've mentioned. In terms of industry recognition, not many in the Philippines, not many companies are familiar with microcredentials, apart from transnational corporations, which are based in different parts of the world. Like, for example, if the root company is in America or Europe, then they are familiar with microcredentials. But mostly Philippine-based companies are not yet familiar with microcredentials. So it's just starting. It's in infancy stage. But what I'm proposing is that we do not wait for all of these things. We do the initiative. We go first. Education has the reputation of being late in responding to what's happening in the world. And I don't want HEIs to be again late in developing micro-credentials when everybody has already done it, when everybody has already recognized it. So we must be at the forefront and do it now, while you know what the good thing is that if there are no policies, you can be the one to create policies, which will be recognized later on by industries.
Thank you, Jake. That's a great response to a great question. I think, yes, the messiness of trying to establish some sort of unified quality assurance. I mean, it's been going on for years in terms of professional, well, I mean, certainly within the European context, you know, getting a qualification that will then enable you to maybe practice nursing in a different country, or social work, or counseling, whatever it might be. So it's not an easy process. But Dick, thank you so much. Maybe this is the area in which you know, microcredentials can be trialed, because in a way it's a low stakes, arguably it's low stakes. So this could be a very interesting forum and arena in which to trial some of our ideas around microcredentials. So Dick, your paper was really important and a very valuable contribution to the summit. So thank you. Do we have any more questions for any of our other speakers? Maybe for Gareth and Rob, or for Sidney?
I have a general question.
Yep. Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so my name is Vicky Doranani. I too, like Emma, am based here in Hong Kong, working with the Hong Kong Baptist University. This isn't necessarily based on any specific speaker from this panel. I'm just saying holistically based on this conference or the two-day summit. What I've realized is, or at least, you know, everyone's obviously got very different versions of what works for based on their own personal experiences from the virtual exchange and COIL. You know, I think everyone has that similar North Star in terms of global citizenship and, you know, internationalizing from home, etc. You know, I think due to limited time and resources, sometimes I believe a lot of people may favor, and I may be wrong in assuming that people may favor a more shorter virtual exchange, maybe a 4 to 5 week affair versus a longer, more structured program. Albeit, I think, you know, based on one of the keynote speakers earlier, she came up with a very good, albeit probably more extensive resource-wise program where students spend 2 months in each city. Yeah. I'm not so sure if, Alex, you heard this particular keynote, but there was one that was being run at the university in Japan where students came in for 2 months. And then students from the Japan cohort went to the US for 2 months. And obviously that takes up a lot of time and money, of course. So, but again, you know, based on Emma's talk as well, there was perhaps a drop-off in some level of interest and level of activity based on the longer the programs ran. So I was just wondering whether there was any ideal length of cohort time, which probably has been investigated or researched on, which perhaps gets maybe the best balance and outcome. And just to add to that, I forgot my follow-up thought, but maybe when you answer the question,
that's a good,
I might follow up on that.
That is a really very interesting question. And I say that because within this panel, we started off, I think, with Dr. Chan, Dr. Sidney Chan, with a 6-week program. We moved to Gareth and Rob, who had a 17-week program. Maria and I were using a 12-week model. So you can start to see that maybe one size doesn't fit all. But I wondered, Gareth and Rob, if you had any thoughts, because yours was the longest. Oh, can you hear me, Gareth?
I can hear you.
Rob. Yes, Rob Herschel. I wondered.
Yes.
Yes. Good.
In terms of our program, it was 15 weeks. It is 15 weeks. It's still ongoing. But I don't know that it's not really comparable because it's an on-demand course. It's asynchronous. So the students do log in weekly. They have weekly assignments, but it doesn't quite serve the same purpose, I don't think.
Thanks, Rob.
Sure.
Okay, we've got. Does anybody else? We've got another question. This is to get. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
That's okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I know we're running out of time.
Okay.
But just on that note regarding the. Sorry, just on that note, and I guess maybe that's still work in progress in terms of the ideal length. What I was thinking about is, and again, based on one of the other earlier conversations, that, you know, sometimes there are a lot of stereotypes that get attached. For example, Chinese students may be a bit more quiet. And then the people who've had previous experience dealing with this part of the world, especially the East, we do request that maybe those from the West take more initiative in speaking when they have those synchronous opportunities. But I'm just a little bit worried that sometimes, given the fact that maybe the shorter COIL sessions versus the longer COIL sessions or virtual exchange sessions may, in some, again, of more assumptions or assumption being held by me, but maybe reinforce those stereotypes versus being able to really develop a longer, more transformational versus transactional relationships between those virtual exchange participants when they get to really know each other and realize that there's more common ground versus those stereotypes.
That's such a great point, Vicky. There. So thank you for that. I don't know if do any of our other speakers want to respond to that quickly. I mean, I think it is a very important point. I mean, I was in a session yesterday where I also spoke to a term that I hadn't used before, and that was COIL promiscuity. But I might use it in the future. You know, this idea of getting as many different COIL partners as you can, but not really engaging and building those relationships. And so, you know, there's a bit of a trade-off there, isn't it, between the sort of the depth or the superficiality. And I think you're right, Vicky, in raising the issue about the time frames over which COIL takes place. And I think there is a sense that in the literature, at least, you know, the work that's been done by the Sunny COIL communities, John Rubin and so on, that there does to be a tendency maybe for the 6-week model, the shorter models. So I think you're right to raise that as an important question, and that we should all be asking ourselves, maybe we need to be looking at what is it we're aiming to do first before we decide on the length, rather than trying to fit everything into one model. Maybe we should be asking ourselves, maybe there are different things we can be doing with VE COIL, and what would be the best approach for that. I'm just aware we are running out of time. I think we've got time for maybe two more questions. Could I ask if there's any questions in particular for our online speakers? So we've got one here. In general, students from many Asian cultures tend to be more reserved in sharing their thoughts and feelings, particularly in cross-cultural classroom settings. The tendency is influenced by a range of cultural and educational factors, not because Asian students lack insight or ideas, but due to norms around communication, hierarchy, and group harmony. Absolutely. How do we create or negotiate assessment rubrics for reflections while considering this? Now, who was this from? Because it's Dr. Eugenio. That is a wonderful question. That's a very, very important question. I don't know, Maria, because you spend most of your time at the moment as she runs our course on education, inclusion and special educational needs. You do spend a lot of time looking at rubrics matrix assessment. Do you have any particular thoughts? I know I should be asking the speakers, but you are one of the speakers.
Creative assessments. So I think when you look at inclusion more generally, you need to ask yourself whether the traditional essay is actually the best way forward, especially when you are promoting something that can be as innovative and creative as what we are looking at here. So maybe there needs to be a way to accommodate the different cultures that basically, because of these cultural norms and values that Dr. Dick has mentioned, tend to be more silent. And in fact, there is something called silent pedagogies. So what do you tend to use for assessment when you have silent pedagogies? Well, they could be things, for example, like Padlet or other platforms that are similar, where students can actually make contributions or raise questions in class without having to be confronted by the need to speak up or speak out. And there are a range of ways that you can elicit authentic voice as well. So on one of the modules that we do, which is education in the digital era, rather than having an assessment, this is a presentation assessment that I'm talking about, but rather than having one that is live, we actually invite students to record that. So, you know, it's about thinking outside the box and facilitating ways in assessment that are not only authentic but genuine, and that still meet the brief, because come the end of the day, we're all accountable. We have criteria in modules that we have to meet. So it's about changing our assessment practices to be more creative, but still genuine and still rigorous, if you like. It's hard, but it's doable. You know, everything's doable. That's what I like to think. Thank you.
Now, I realize we are coming to the end and I do need to round up, but very, very briefly, I would just like to ask Dr. Chan one thing, Sidney Chan, and it was about the use of humor in tackling changes. I know you mentioned it, the use of using Borat, for example, in and I thought that was that could go terribly wrong, perhaps. But yet humor is such a great way, probably the best way to engage. If you can you know, those boundaries around humor, if you get them right, they're probably the most powerful thing. So I wondered if you had any thoughts about that. And then following that, I just wondered if Gareth and Rob could just, I'm old enough to remember Pen Friends. Now, Pen Friends, for those of you that aren't so as old as I am, was you would be paired up with somebody in a different country and you would write them a letter, and pen pals, and they would write back. Now, I was clearing out the attic the other day and we found some old pen friend letters, and we've kept them all this time. And that just seems extraordinary. It shows the value that we placed on this quite intimate and virtual, in a way, you know, this was the pioneering sort of virtual exchanges. And I just wondered if Gareth and Rob, you wanted to comment on, you know, that French saying, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The, you know, the more things change, the more things stay the same. So I wondered if, yes, we could start with Dr. Sidney.
When I chose that movie, of course, I realized all these misrepresentations. That's my purpose of showing this movie in class. Before showing the movie, I literally showed two pictures. One is Bora, the fictional character. The other one is a real Kazakhstani, and my friend. And when I showed the two pictures, I asked my student, which one do you think is the real Kazakh? And 99% of the students who put up their hand would point to Borat. And this is what they think, what real Kazakh is. So, and then I question them, why do you have such perspective? So this is one of the learning process, because they get to think about, they get to reflect on their own beliefs. Why do they believe in such misrepresentation? And that is the purpose of my class, is to discuss the misrepresentations of culture and to talk about all these stereotypes, because the courses I teach is cultural studies courses, and it is media representation of culture. So that's why, that's just the, it's correct that we need to have a boundary to respect to other culture, but I think that it is also a way to open up the conversation with students. And when I travel to Kazakhstan, the people there are very open to this stereotype. And at least the people that I met, and they were like, oh, have you watched Borat before coming to Kazakhstan? This is the same as what you thought before. Yeah, so I think, and it's very interesting that even though the government didn't really embrace the Borat 1, but they kind of use Borat 2 to promote their country. So you're right, humor is a way to connect with the students. They don't really particularly like something very serious, like, oh, you're wrong and we should not do that, but yeah, I use that as a way, as a way to open up the conversation.
Thank you, Sidney. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know, Gareth.
I'll just
some
brief comments. We think that that's, it's just versatile activity. It's a nice activity, I think, and I think it would probably work better on paper. If we collected them, put them in envelopes, and handed them back to the students at the end of the course. It is, when the students open the letter, they've reported to us. It's something that they enjoy, and it's something that we're part of this 2-year English program. It's something that we're considering bringing in at the beginning of that 2-year program, class 1, and then class 120 at the end, opening it then. And then, like I said, it's not specific to intercultural learning. As an activity, it could be used widely. It's just a nice activity, I think.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think we'll need to leave it there. Can I just thank all our speakers and also all our audience today and for your participation. And I don't know about anybody else, but I've absolutely loved being part of this conference, meeting new people online and in person. So thanks, everybody. And have a good evening, morning, afternoon.